This week, I'm going to show you how to photograph water droplets. Sometimes you'll want to go out and shoot, but the weather conditions will be really bad, or you have no way of getting to a good location. If this is the case, follow along with this exercise. It's quite challenging, and you can get some really unique images from it. This is what you'll need. Basically, you're going to hang the bag, you're going to put a hole in the bottom of the bag, and it's going to drip into a bowl of water. The aim of the exercise is to take a photo of the droplet as it hits the water. The first thing you'll want to do is set up a place where you can hang the bag from. I'm using a C-stand, but if you have a boom arm on your light stand, you can use this as well. If you don't have any of these, you can hang it from a light fixture from the ceiling. All you need is a bit of fishing line. Make sure the light's turned off, tie the fishing wire around the light fixture, and then make a hole in the bag and then tie this together. I've basically got a C-stand and a clamp. The clamp is really strong, so it holds the bag easily. What I've done in this instance is put a towel over the breakfast bar. Then I've put a big bowl on the towel to catch any water that splashes around.
I then fill the little bowl with water to the brim and a small amount into the bag before clamping it into place.
Next, you'll set your camera up on your tripod. Try a few different angles. What I've found is just above the surface of the water works really well. So you don't see the front of the glass, but you see a bit of the top of the surface, then this disappears away. Make sure the bag is hanging directly over the bowl before you prick a hole in the bottom with a pin. Basically, you're going to be timing the shutter release with when the water droplet hits the surface of the water. So if you have a slow, even drip, this works really well. If it's dripping too fast, empty some of the water out of the bag. If it's dripping too slow, pour some more water into the bag. Today, I've used the RX10 Mark III, and I've got it right at the end of the zoom. I've placed the camera as close as I can, so it's at its minimum focusing distance. Basically, you just need to get as close as you can without getting your camera wet. That's why a telephoto lens works really well.
Next, attach your shutter release. You can either use a wired one or a remote. I have a wired one today.
As you're going to be using the flash, you need to know the sync speed of your camera. Most DSLRs are around about 1/180th of a second to 1/1200th of a second. The sync speed of the camera I'm using is 1/100th of a second. So just make sure you know your sync speed and don't have the shutter speed faster than this figure. If you're not sure what sync speed is but want to learn more about it, click on the eye in the corner. This will take you to a video explaining this. In this exercise, you might get carried away and take lots of photos. So make sure you've got lots of batteries and plenty of room on your memory card. I then set my camera to the following settings.
I make sure my camera is in manual mode.
I put my shutter speed at 1/100th of a second. I put my f-stop to f11. The ISO is on 100. I set the white balance to flash.
I switch live view display off. I then attach the wireless flash controller to the camera and the receiver to the flash unit.
I put the flash on manual and 1/32. I'll use the flash handheld and I'll keep moving it around and keep looking at the images that I'm producing. Then I'll start to fire shots off and slowly dial in the settings. Basically, you'll have two different sources of light. You'll have the ambient light and you'll have the flashlight. The flash and the aperture determine how much of that flashlight gets into the camera. The shutter speed determines how much ambient light gets into the camera. And the ISO determines how much flash and ambient light get into the camera. This may sound confusing, but because the flash is so quick, shutter speed doesn't affect it unless you're past the sync speed, and then you'll get half of it exposed with the flash and half of it not. It's quite tricky to get the focus right, especially if you've got a modern day camera with a focus by wire system. The best way to do this is to balance a pencil across the bowl exactly where the drips are going to land. Then you can focus on the pencil and then set the camera to manual focus. So it's always focused on that one point. Then remove the pencil and leave the focus alone. If you move the camera, make sure to refocus using this technique. I like to have the background black, so I make sure the shutter speed is as high as the sync speed will allow. Keep the shutter speed here and leave it alone. You'd only drop the shutter speed if you want to let some ambient light in. Now timing is everything. You have to time the shutter release with the water drop. So if you've got a slow, steady drip, it makes it easier. You have to time your trigger as the water drop hits the water. Once you get the timing, you want to play around with it to try and get the timing just slightly before the water droplet hits, during the water droplet hitting, and after. Or you might get where the water's splashed in and it's coming out and you get this crown-like effect. I think I took around about 1,500 photos doing this exercise, but I'm quite happy with some of the photos I got from it. While you're shooting, make sure you're not flooding the area and keep topping up the bag whenever the drips stop. Also, if your hands are wet, make sure you dry them with a spare towel before handling your camera, the lights, and especially the flash. Now try moving the camera slightly up or down and see what different effects you can get. If the image is quite dark, open up the aperture or increase the power on your flash. If it's bright and overexposed, drop the power of the flash or close down your aperture. Now try moving the flash around the drop. Some of the images that I got that I like the most are where I've backlit the shot with a small aperture. What the small aperture will do is starlight any reflections of the flash. So you can see in this shot, the flash has reflected through the droplet and the small aperture has made this reflection starburst into the camera. What I normally find with this exercise is the images at the start look quite rubbish. I haven't got the camera quite dialed in. I may not have got the focus right, or I may not have got the camera in the right place. Look at the images that you've taken and see what you can change to improve the image. Once you get into the groove, you'll start producing much better photos. And this is one of the great things with this exercise. It teaches you that you actually need to warm up when you're taking pictures. A lot of the times I'll be on professional shoots, I'll go there a little bit early and I'll get started with the camera. So by the time the model or the person or the thing that I'm photographing is ready, I'll have warmed up and I'll have got into the groove. Once I've got a good position, I'll start adding color. You can add color by putting gels onto the flash. This is basically colored plastic in front of the flash. I'm not too keen on this because it just makes it look like the white balance is out. The thing I prefer doing is changing the color of the surface that you put the bowl on. If the bowls are clear, and when you get the angle of the flash right, this color will come through the water and you'll see it on the ripples in the surface. You can also add food coloring and also oil into the water. This gives some really weird effects. Just make sure you're not using your best towels. The last thing you want to do is ruin the towels and get into trouble. And that's about it. If you go through this exercise, you'll learn so much about photography, how the flash works with your camera, and a little bit about timing. I always get carried away in this exercise, take loads of photos, and end up still snapping away 2 or 3 hours later. But once I get dialed in, I can get some really nice photos. And if you persist at it, you can too. As always, if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. And for weekly tutorials, hints and tips in photography, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.